We are going to get started. So for those of you who haven't been a part of our workshop series through OEI, this is a part of a Launch Lab series. So it's a specific series designed for people who are looking to put a product in the market and test some things out. And so Parmjot is an expert, and we are so lucky to have him here. And today he is going to speak to us about business modeling. And so if you haven't met Parmjot, I see some familiar faces, but some of you did not meet Parmjot in the Pitch Camp series that he gave. And so I'll do a little plug. We do have that online, and you can go watch him there, and it is awesome and it's worth your time. So I'll put that in the chat, check it out. But for those of you who have not met Parmjot yet, Parmjot is an entrepreneur and an investor. He's been a startup coach, and I know I give this spiel, I've done it before, but he's a really good coach. And if you can't tell, he coaches people without even thinking about it in the moment, which I think is the best type of coach. He's a Goodwill ambassador for the state of Arkansas, and he's our mentor in residence. And so we are super proud and excited to have him here, and so glad that you guys are joining us today. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Parmjot, and he's going to take it away.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The thing you forgot to mention was, as you can tell from my accent, I'm actually not from here. I'm from Rogers. No, it always works, always works, always. There's always something new, always something new. Every time, Sarah, every single time. And it's a joke you can recycle no matter where you go. You just do a little bit of research, find out a nice local town. Always start off in Canada the same way. They love it. They love it. So welcome, everybody. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that where I'm presenting from is on the ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are all people of the treaty. May we all live in peace. So thank you very much and welcome. And I'm just going to share my screen, and we are going to talk about business models, making it work. So what is a business model? And my name is Parmjot Valia, and that thing I am allowed, unlike some people, I'm allowed to use Twitter. So no more references there, no more reference. That's the last one. Sarah, thank you very much. Don't get nervous. So what we're going to talk about today is what is a business model? What are the assumptions behind a model? How do you test them? And I know lots of you are here where you do have an idea and you have a business model, but the key thing is how can you test? And what you're really trying to do is de-risk a business model. And the whole point of this analysis is to learn some practical things that you can go away and say, let me do this so I can test the thesis behind my business model and then de-risk it and pivot and change. There's no such thing as a static business model. The whole idea behind a business model is, and this is why I love the one-page canvas idea, it's extraordinarily dynamic. You use it, you iterate, you change. When the evidence changes, you change your business model. But the key equation underpinning all of this is that the cost of client acquisition must be something like 1/10 of the lifetime value of a client. You simply cannot make money, you cannot grow as a business if your cost of client acquisition is way too high compared to the lifetime value of a client. Okay, so if any of you have any questions, Stacey, would you be kind enough to monitor the text box? Because I can't see the text box going. Last time I was trying to. So if there are any questions, I do like to make this very interactive, and I will be asking you all. I will be picking on you and saying, if you had a question, what would that be? So I warn you now, I will be asking you. This is an interactive session, and let's go move on. What is a business model? A business model is trying to answer 3 key things. It's a model that describes how you create, how you deliver, and how you capture value. Those are 3 distinct things. They're not the same. So how do you create value? Okay, so there are people here. Amanda, I know your business model a little bit, so I might mention your business model if you're okay with that. So we know how you create value. You create value by preventing bullying online. That's how you create value. The question is, how do you deliver that value? Question mark. And how do you capture some of that value? Clearly, the buyer has to capture some value, and you have to capture some value as well. Because a lot of great ideas create value, but they don't necessarily answer the how do we deliver and how do we capture value. And a business model, the business model canvas, very similar to the lean canvas, is a way for you to think about the assumptions behind how you create, deliver, and capture value. And we'll talk about, well, how can you test those ideas? If I'm speaking too fast, please do let me know. The people I can see on my screen, I can't see everybody. The people I can see are Stacey, Amanda, Sarah, and Stephanie. So if you do have any questions, please do let me know. All is good. So this is a business model canvas, and don't worry about this slide. It's horrific. I just want to show you everything on one slide. But what we're really doing is answering these basic questions. Who is your customer? Never as easy as you think. It's always difficult to think about who actually is your customer. And there are often 4 types of customers in any, some people would argue a fifth, and I'll talk about the fifth, but there are 4 main customers. There's the economic buyer, the economic customer, who actually signs the checks, who actually writes you a check. The technical buyer. Who is the buyer that you have to persuade that your software solution, your processing system, your consultancy service, your food product meets the legal requirements, the technical requirements that the organization has, is compatible with what they have. Those would be the technical buyers. They can be big obstacle blocks if you're not careful in terms of how you do the sale. So who is your technical buyer? Then who is your user buyer? The user buyer is rarely, especially in corporate situations, is rarely the economic buyer. So who is the user buyer? Facebook's a great example where the economic buyer is the advertiser. The technical buyer would be the people doing the software, making sure the system is robust, etc. And the user buyers are us, people who are actually using Facebook. We don't think that we are paying for Facebook, but of course we are through the attention we give Facebook. Then if you're doing a corporate sale, often you have to deal with what's called a champion buyer. You will often need to find a champion who will help navigate you into the organizations, help you sell to the organization. Then there is a fifth buyer, which people are increasingly touching on, which is the purchasing department, the purchasing buyer. Having dealt with this at the university, do not underestimate the obstacles you sometimes have to overcome dealing with the purchasing department of large organizations. And often you can get the economic, the technical, the user buyer all on board, but then the purchasing buyer says, because of stipulation X, Y, and Z, we can't actually buy from this person. So never underestimate the purchasing department. Be very clear, and the business model should also look to answer the question, what exactly are you selling them? Is it an asset sale? What kind of thing is it that you're selling them? How do you deliver the value? How does the customer perceive that they've received value? How do you talk to and engage with your customer? Very, very important. It will also make a big difference to how you go to market. How do you make money? One of the questions that a lot of businesses don't answer very well, and especially with business plan competitions, you find that that is the area that sometimes people just don't address. How do you make money? What are the assets you need? What are the key things you need? The key resources, the key activities? And what partners do you need? Which are strategic partners? Who do you outsource what to? Do you outsource the sales? Do you outsource the production? What is it you outsource? What do you have to do? What is the key activity that you do? Is it platform? Is it networking? Is it production? Is it problem solving? What is it? It's one of those 3 things. And what does all of that mean about your cost structure? Because remember, you've got to be able to capture value. So that is an overview of the key questions that a business model seeks to have answered. And each block has a certain amount of assumptions. And I always like to think of a business model as a kind of Lego set. The pieces have to fit together. So you can't have, we're going to be brand, we're going to be niche, we're going to be top of the range design. That's what our value proposition is, but we're going to use the cheapest possible ingredients. There, the blocks don't fit. Or we're going to be the cheapest possible product. It's going to be available in the market to everybody, but we're going to use the very, very best ingredients. One of the mentors that Sarah, you and I have worked with, one of my best mentors, certainly my mentors, Mike Sikorsky, he had this great line which says, none of the world's best restaurants offer a buffet. And I think that's a really, really powerful thing. It's a really powerful way to thinking. Do one thing and do it very, very well. There is always a amazing correlation between how many revenue lines you have as a startup and your chances of failing. Focus on one thing initially, do that one thing very, very well, then move on to it. So that each one of these building blocks, each one of the 9 blocks of a business model has certain number of assumptions, and think through what are those assumptions. What I want you to also do is think about how can we test those assumptions. I know a lot of you engage in customer discovery. Customer discovery is very, very important. It's the heart of this. But often people don't hear what customer discovery is. So how many of you have seen The Apprentice, and you see an episode of The Apprentice, the UK version? Clearly, they talk about The Apprentice, and The Apprentice is all hear certain things. I have to tell you, actually, on a serious note, you can tell the difference between the UK and US culture by looking at soaps and looking at The Apprentice. In The Apprentice, all of the US, I'm always amazed at the caliber of the US contestants. They're MBA students, they're this, they're that. UK, they're all kind of Rialto agents and recruitment agents, and they just like really just pick them off the back of the street. And it's the UK version is much funnier. It's a comedy. It's hilarious. And I think soap operas, I've always noticed the US soap opera is always about the life of the glamorous and the rich, whereas the UK soap opera is always the life about the poor and the working class. Very, very interesting. So think about how can you, sorry, I do this all the time in my courses. I'm sorry, I digress, which is what makes them so interesting, Sarah. No two courses are ever the same, are they? So how can you test these assumptions? Very important that you test them. And do you have evidence that your assumptions are provable? Because there are some statements that people say things like, there was a customer discovery, somebody was doing this product, and they said that our customer discovery found that 98% of mothers did not want their babies to have bee stings. I could have told them that before they did any customer research, because the opposite, the good thing about assumptions is you've got to flip the assumption to say the opposite, which is, will you find mothers who want their kids to have bee stings? And the answer is going to be no, because they were trying to do this product to do with bee stings, but that was just complete waste of customer discovery. And then what happens whenever you put up a line of arguments, if that's your first line of argument, I'm going to now dismiss all the other arguments that come after that, no matter how hard you've worked, because you started with such a weak argument. So do you have evidence that your assumptions are provable? Do you need investments? Because if you do need investment, if you're going to make a big decision about whether you're going to do a startup or whether you're going to work, you need this kind of proof for yourself. And the hardest thing we have to do, and there's a great book that Sarah recommended, Think Again by Adam Grant, great book. I'm actually going to be doing a workshop on that book, and I'll send you details. You're welcome to join us. But the whole thing about that book is we find it very difficult to think again, to question our assumptions. We get so wedded to the ideas that we think, and we've got to think like scientists. And the whole idea behind the lean methodology is so that we can think like scientists, and we should create opinions which are hypotheses rather than fixed, firm opinions, because things keep changing. I can't think of many views I've held on to as rigid. Things keep changing, evidence keeps changing. If you need investment or you're making a big decision, look critically at that proof. Don't just build a support network, build a really supportive challenge network. And I want you to go through every single block, listing the assumptions, those 9 blocks, listing all the assumptions and thinking about how can I positively or negatively test every single one of the assumptions that I am making. So I talked about customers. Now this isn't all of them, but all of them, there's loads, and you can go through it. The business model canvas and the lean canvas covers this, but here are several. A niche, I think Americans call it niche, but obviously it's I'm from England, and it's called English for a reason, so we'll use the word niche. Niches are obviously a very, very small targeted thing. Mass is everyone. So McDonald's is a really good example of mass. Niche is something like personal training. Segmented is where you can actually divide through artificial barriers the customer group. So one of the things that's always interesting to me is if we flew on a flight to London from Arkansas, if you went to Arkansas to London, and if you went there on a Monday to Friday, the flight's going to be much more expensive than if you go Monday to Monday. Does anybody know why? Anybody know why it's more expensive? I'm going to pick on something. I'm going to pick on Brandon. Brandon, why is it more expensive to fly Monday to Friday than it is to fly Monday to Friday?
Wait, sorry, did you say Monday to Friday till Monday to Friday?
Monday to Friday is much more expensive than Monday to Monday.
Honestly, I cannot tell you.
Not a problem, Brandon. It was a trick question. The reason is, Brandon, I know that if you're traveling Monday to Friday, you're probably traveling on business. If you're traveling over the weekend, you're probably a leisure traveler. Leisure travelers are far more price sensitive than business travelers, because business travelers will just put the expenses on the business account. So therefore, I can charge you a lot more for your Monday to Friday flight than I'll charge someone else who's going to go Monday to Monday. So that is a good example of segmentation, where you are actually segmenting the population on artificial grounds. If you book 3 months in advance, you're probably a leisure traveler, whereas if you book at the last minute, you're probably a business traveler. So I do all these things to segment you and find out more and more about you. The internet has made it possible for us to do very, very clever segmentation. Diversified customer segments would be something like, if you look at Pampers, and the other product they do, the toilet paper they do, Huggies, Pampers and Huggies would be examples where Procter & Gamble have basically got different customer segments, but what Procter & Gamble share in common is the ability to manipulate paper, buy paper, manipulate paper, and sell it as a packaged good. And then you have multi-sided customer segments, where eBay is a good example. A company I'm involved in, Wuxi, where we create a marketplace. Airbnb is a good example. Uber is a good example, where you create multi-sided. But what Uber also tries to do is do segmented as well as multi-sided by having different offerings, where you can have Uber XL, Uber Share. I think there's an Uber Share thing as well, where you can, it takes slightly longer, but you share a journey with sometimes very, very interesting people. What is your value proposition? Now, there are lots and lots of, there are multiple value propositions here. I'm just going to focus on a few here. And the value propositions are something is new. Do you like, I love this Microsoft Word thing. They just do the things for you, themselves. So new, they obviously thought I meant New Year. So that's why it's a Chinese kind of flavor to new. Performance is your value proposition, performance. So a BMW, you might say, is brand, but actually the brand value stemmed from the BMW promise of performance. Lots of people buy things, Slack, diets, they all are new. And if you're the latest new thing, TRX, exercise things, they're all kind of the value proposition initially is that it's new. Customization, tailored suits, we can do tailored solutions. What I really like is traditionally you can't do mass and customization. One of the brilliant businesses recently that does mass and customization is McDonald's. And I just love the way McDonald's, through the touch screen, can do, every burger can be customized. So I've learned now, bit of a distraction, but I've learned that my favorite burger is a Quarter Pounder with cheese, but with a Big Mac sauce. Because I like a Big Mac, but Big Mac, there's way too much bread. Way too much. Nobody needs that much bread. Whereas Quarter Pounder with cheese, I just don't like it's a bit bland. So now I can actually go into every McDonald's and just order on the screen a Big Mac with a Quarter Pounder with cheese with Big Mac sauce. So that's a good example of customization. Excuse me, customization and mass. And then obviously the value proposition for a lot of businesses is brand. Juliet, if you had a question at this stage, what would your question be? Juliet Espinoza? I'm picking on you. After you, I want to pick on Olga. So Olga, get ready with your question. Juliet, if you had a question, what would your question be?
Branding, how to
do it. So branding is that's a very good question. And it's one of those questions that I can't actually answer. So thank you for asking a question I can't answer, because it's a really, really big subject. How do you create a brand? How do you do branding? And there are other people on this call who probably know more about branding than I do. Branding is very, very difficult, but branding is something that you've got to make sure that the customer group wants branding. Often in a lot of businesses, branding is superfluous, but people just want to build brands. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking me the question that I couldn't answer. Thank you, Juliet. Olga, if you had a question that I could answer, what would your question be?
Well, I'm looking at this all with a perspective of social enterprise. So I'm wondering what would be, I'm just wondering, I don't know, what would be maybe the most common and maybe the most valuable value for social enterprises?
Performance. One of the things that social enterprises needs to do is demonstrate impact. You need to demonstrate that for every dollar spent, this is going to be the impact. I was involved in a child's charity, and one of the things they did very brilliantly was they did this chart of, if you donated X amount of money, this is exactly what we could do for that money. So there are lots of charities that say, if you give us $7, for that $7, we can buy a goat. With a goat, we can do this. If you give us $100, we can do this. So you can actually, you can see exactly what the performance is. So the value proposition is very much customization. The gift is customized, but the performance isn't. But if you do this, you get that. And that is a beautiful thing to do. So if you're in social enterprise, I think you've always got to be looking at impact. And what people are increasingly, I think Bill Gates and others have started this, that people are increasingly professionalizing how they do social enterprise and how they do social impact. I think 15, 20 years ago, people didn't really talk about social enterprise. And when people did talk about social enterprise, it was very much charity, not social enterprise. Whereas what we're doing now is with social enterprise, it's about sustainability and impact, sustainability and impact. I hope that answers the question, Olga.
Yes, thank you. Mhm.
My pleasure.
Permja.
Yes.
We had Amanda raise her hand, actually. So you're
Amanda, I can't believe I ignored my bestie. Woo! Amanda, what was the question?
On a lighter note, if that's your your favorite hamburger, what do you order at Starbucks?
Oh my gosh. I am going to bore you by saying a Grand Blonde Americano.
Brilliant. That's a good one.
And Amanda, do you know why it's called Americano?
Yes, because you add water, because we can't handle caffeine.
So yeah, it was during World War II. It was all the GIs when they went to Italy. They would order coffee, and they would like water and say Americano. So
Nice.
I remember I went to Italy and I ordered a latte, and I remember just getting some milk. There was no coffee. It was just a milk.
Mm-hmm.
I said, where's the coffee? Latte con espresso. I said, yeah. So be careful what you order. Sometimes the Starbucks. And do you know why it's called venti?
Venti is French for, is it tall?
No, venti is Italian for 20 because it's 20 ounces.
Ah, very good.
Oh, I did get you that. Yes, not that it's a competition, Amanda, and I want to encourage you all to ask questions. But yeah, that's the thing that always struck me, that venti, you know, the venti is the very big one, isn't it? It's tall, grande, and then venti, yeah. And venti is because it's 20 ounces. I'm like, wow. Thank you for the question, Amanda. Thank you. Which channels, how do you go to market? There's direct and there's indirect. Do you go to market directly? Do you have your own stores? Do you go on your own website? Are you available through other people's websites? Do you use your own sales force? Do you use other people's sales force? Do you agents? So you've got all these big questions about which channels, and you've got to do certain things. You've got to work out, why do you need channels? Do people need to evaluate your product? So for example, we know from all the research that now a lot of direct internet customers are trying to change this, but at the moment, the most powerful predictor of whether somebody will buy a car from me or not is if they come in for a test drive. A test drive is the most important thing to determine whether someone is going to buy a product. So for them, for car dealerships, despite the expense, they need a place where people can evaluate the product. So channels can perform a very, very important thing. You might need to go direct. So Nike, interesting enough, in the UK, I don't know if they're doing the same thing in the US, but in the UK, they are now stopping sales to third-party stores. Nike will soon only be available in Nike stores, because Nike and lots of other brands are saying, we want to control and shape our brands. Because when they look at brands like Lululemon, who you cannot buy Lululemon anywhere other than from Lululemon, they have far greater control and stewardship of their brand than, say, a Nike. So these are big questions for you. Do you go direct or do you go indirect? Now, the problem with going direct is it's much more control, but it's a lot slower and it needs a lot more capital. So direct is possible if you have big VCs kind of supporting you. Then I want you to think about, what are the customer relationships you need? Do you need, are you at the acquisition phase where you just quickly need to acquire lots of customers? Reid Hoffman talks about this brilliantly in his book, Blitzscaling. And he talks about, when you are rapidly acquiring customers, you have to decide which fires to let burn and you can't focus on making sure all the customers are happy. You can't. You just got to let that go, because you are just so busy acquiring customers. And as long as you are acquiring customers at a far greater rate than you're losing them, you're going to be okay. But then soon enough, the business will transition to retention. Or you might be, Amanda, if you think about your business, you might be B2B, where retention is very important, that actually there are very, very few customers who will buy your product. If that is the case, then your business model will need to focus on, well, how will you have those relationships? How will you retain those relationships? How will you upsell? You might start off with one product, but then you have to have a plan 2, plan 3, plan 4 in terms of phases of products you're going to sell to them, because upselling and retention is vital to your profitability. Whereas if you're a direct to consumer business, acquisition is going to be the most important thing, not necessarily retention and upselling. Think about your revenue. How do you make money? Again, go into the business model for much more detail, but these are just a few of the things, such as asset sale. Do you sell something? Is it per usage? Is it subscription? Like Disney Plus? Is it rental? And then there are brokerage as a revenue, advertising as a revenue, which is a terrible, terrible, terrible business model thing, unless you have tens of millions of eyeballs. So advertising is not bad. It's just advertising only really makes sense once you have tens of millions of viewers. What are the key resources you need to do something? Is it physical? Do you just need lots and lots of people to be able to do that? That's actually the wrong, and I was that is the wrong example. I'm sorry. By physical, I mean, is your key resources such as a superstore where you're just the actual icon through me? Physical is actually, do you need superstores? Do you actually need physical assets? Do you need infrastructure? Is that your key resource? Or is it intellectual? Is the intellectual a key resource, or is it financial? So think about what are the key resources you need. So one of the key resources, General Electric, they sell nuclear power stations. Nuclear power stations are a little bit expensive. It's been some time since I bought a nuclear power station, but my rich friends, actually, this is a true story. This is actually a true story. I know someone in London who's an extraordinarily wealthy person. He just assumes that everybody is as wealthy as he is. And we were just sat and having a sandwich. And he said to me, he's just bought an island in Fiji. This is actually a true story. He's saying, I just bought an island in Fiji. I said, oh, great. And he goes, yeah, the island wasn't too expensive, but getting a runway built is really expensive. Pamjot, who do you use to have runways built? And I said, oh, let me just check my Rolodex. I did use John once, but he was no good. You want to go with Paul? No, I'm like, no, I've never had a runway built. I don't know who builds runways. That is just never something I want to think about. But he actually assumed that everybody knows somebody who builds runways in islands. And it's just one of those weird things. But back to the example of financial. So what GE do is GE's key resource is their balance sheet. They can actually lend the client the money they need to buy the nuclear power station. So GE Financial actually started as a way of financing customers being able to buy the product. The other people who do that are drug dealers, not making any comparisons whatsoever, but they also will lend you the money to buy the first product. So there you go, GE, drug dealers, same thing. Key activities, I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, 3 things that you really do. Is it production? Do you make something? Do you solve problems? Or do you provide a platform? The reason why all of these distinctions are important is the rest of the business model needs to flow and needs to support this. So for example, if your key activity is problem solving, your intellectual ability is a key part of your key resources. Therefore, your HR approach, how you recruit people, what you stand for, what you do, how you do things becomes very important around that key activity. Whereas if your production, your key resource might be something completely different, it might be physical, just infrastructure. So really think through how, like the Lego set, how these pieces all come together. And I mentioned this as well earlier. Think about who is your customer. Is it economic? Is it technical? Is it user? And one of the biggest problems is, if many of you are scientists, and I've worked with a lot of scientists when I'm doing this, they always assume the customer is the customer they deal with. So they often assume that the customer is a technical customer. So they rarely understand the user dimension or the economic dimension. They just understand the technical people get talking, and the technical people design a beautiful product, but they haven't understood the economics, and they haven't understood how somebody would use it. And you see this, so many classic products. One of the things that I think Silicon Valley does horrifically badly is design products for women. And why is it that they design products badly for women? Because most of the technical people working in Silicon Valley tend to be men. So they design products for men. And there are lots of little things, like even when they developed the first, I think, Oculus Rift, it was designed in a suboptimal way for women. So it's just incredible how loads of little subtle things happen all the time, and we don't recognize, we made loads and loads of assumptions. It's one of the things was when the US Air Force, they tried to create a suit for the seating, the seats. And they try to, so what they do is this big exercise where they try to find out the average dimensions of a pilot. And then they came up with the average dimensions, and they realized not one person out of some 127,000 was actually the average, not one out of 127,000. So then what they had to do was they had to have that sliding chair thing where the chair would actually slide on the for the pilot, because they couldn't make one seat that would actually make anybody comfortable. So be very, very careful about averages and things, and understand your customer, understand how they use the product, watch them use the product. I love customer discoveries, but I also love walking in the shoes of my customer. Try walking in the shoes of your customer and go through the journey that they would go through. And think through, why are they a customer? Olga, with social impact, one of the things that we often don't do is we don't ask ourselves a question. Why would they be a customer? We just sometimes assume that they are a customer because it's the right thing to do. But the problem is often lots and lots of people have choices. And the question is, what is the choice they have? What are the alternatives to your project do they have that they could fund? So really think through, why is somebody a customer of yours? Think through the lifetime value of a customer. Sometimes you cannot make money unless the lifetime value of your customer is very, very, very high. I was involved in a taxi business in the UK. I was an investor many, many years ago. The company was called Blueback. We were very good at winning customers, but we were dreadful at keeping the customers. And every time we got a new customer, it cost us money, because it would cost us X to get a new customer before we got the lifetime value out of them. So before we even got our money back on how much it cost to get them, we lost them, because we just didn't have enough capital to run a good taxi service. So the customers just didn't stay with us. Very, very difficult business. Eventually the business went bust. Very, very difficult business to do without massive scale on day one. Think about your cost of client acquisition, like I mentioned. It will determine, the lifetime value will determine how much you can spend acquiring the customer, and therefore how you reach them. So if you turn around and say the lifetime value of a customer is going to be $200, you can do whatever you want, but you can't spend more than $20, $30 acquiring them. You just can't. So if you come up with these, we're going to do these events, we're going to invite them to dinners, we're going to do this. No, we can't do that. You could do that if the lifetime value is $200,000. So you can afford to spend really, really big on branding and marketing and events and all that stuff if their lifetime value is high. If this doesn't work, you need to revisit your business model. This is the number one reason I see businesses not working, because the lifetime value of their client just isn't the same as the cost of client acquisition. And also there's a cash flow issue as well. So even if you can do me a very clever chart that shows me that the cost of client acquisition is $20,000, but the lifetime value is $250,000, great. But then you need to fund that 20,000, because it might be that the 20,000 is, on day one, and then they're going to pay 250,000 and 25,000 installments over 10 years. So how are you going to fund that 20,000 every time you get a new client? So this is really, really, really critical, and people really don't pay enough attention to this bit. Then think about your pricing. How are you going to price? Now, there's fixed pricing, which is, do you have a list pricing? Do you have certain features? We mentioned, Brandon, we talked about airlines, didn't we, and how we could do customer segments. Olga, customer segments is a very important thing with social enterprises. Can you price, can you get the way a lot of countries are approaching COVID-19, where rich countries are paying a certain price for the vaccines and Poorer countries are paying a different price. So can you segment your customers? Think about the volume of the again, great icon that didn't mean the volume as was meant. Volume here means if you buy 10, the price is this. If you buy 100, the price is this. If you buy 1,000, the price is this. So think through all of that pricing model. Then think about dynamic pricing. Often it will be negotiation. You can come up with all the clever things in the world, ultimately be what the person wants to pay. Hotels, airlines, farmers, they use yield management. They have to work out how much rent can I generate from a fixed period of time from a fixed asset. Yield management, that's why they will sell certain seats for this price, certain seats for this price, because they're trying to maximize the profit. Hotels, airlines, all of these kind of businesses try to do the same thing. Then there's real-time markets like the stock market, and then there's auctions like eBay. So are you having a fixed thing or are you having a dynamic thing? Now, I did talk, and I want to very quickly introduce you to lean method. Now, the lean method actually was taught to the Japanese by an American, Denning. So he went over there in Japan after the war to teach them how to do their first census, which was an interesting thing. And he tried to introduce this kind of lean methodology in the US, but US was doing so well at the time that, you know, the hardest thing to do is convince somebody who's doing well that they might need to change. That's the hardest thing to do. As Pascal said, the greatest predictor of failure is success. And he went to Japan and he taught them census, and then he taught the Japanese, and particularly Toyota, about the lean method. And the idea was that you measure success through validated learnings, and you just do lots and lots of small batch experiments, small batch experiments. So that was the idea, small batch. With
Fighting with it.
No worries. What you've got to do with your hypotheses, with all the business models, all the things that we've talked about, you've got to come up with experiments, come up with ways that you think I can either validate a learning or invalidate a learning. And you've got to take the scientific method, which is, here's my hypothesis. I think customers will pay X for this. I think customers really want this. I want social enterprise will really need this or that. You know, disabled sports, Olga, we're talking about disabled sports. My thesis is that everyone enjoys watching the Paralympics. Okay, that's my thesis. What can you do to prove and disprove it? Because what was interesting was when in the 2012 Olympics, when for the first time ever, the Paralympics were given equal TV coverage as the able-bodied Olympics, they actually did very well in viewing figures. People did want to watch it if they had access to it. So there's some data which proves that when given equal billing, people will engage with Paralympics. And there were lots and lots of shows that were being run in the UK. And there was this one show in particular where they had lots of disabled athletes on the show. And they were encouraging people to phone in and ask them, what would you like to ask a disabled person, but you were too afraid to? And it was a comedic twist. It was very funny, but it was also very illustrative, because one of the things they did was they understood there was this barrier that people had, and they were very uncomfortable talking about disabilities because they were scared of being rude, but there was just so much ignorance. So when people started talking about this, it really helped. So there's some experiments there, Olga, that you can do, which show when this happens, so then it becomes attractive to sponsors. It is a really good commercial opportunity, which they proved in London in the 2012 Paralympics. So all of you got to think about what experiments can you do to prove, disprove your hypotheses. And there are two key things that all of you, if you're doing a business, need to prove. Only two things. The value hypothesis. Do people like what you do? Is there value in it? And how will you make it grow? Facebook's a great example. When you think about Facebook, and and it's weird talking about Facebook when somebody from Facebook is on the call. But the great thing about Facebook was when they went to raise money from VCs, they didn't have a business model, they didn't have a revenue model, but the two things they did have was they could show that people had their eyeballs on Facebook more than any other social media at the time. So they always won on the value thing. The other thing they could show was massive, massive virality, that for every one new account that opened, another 8 or 9 followed within 48 to 72 hours. They had this huge virality. Dropbox, when they started, Tim Houston, when he started, not Tim Houston, he's the leader of the political party here. I think it was Drew Houston. When Drew Houston started Dropbox, he didn't have the money to actually make Dropbox because the solution was so big. So he produced a video. His experiment was, let me produce a video to show that people will buy my product. And then he was able to show the mailing list of everybody that said, I want to buy this product, I want to buy this product. So one of the things you can do is do adverts on Facebook to test your theory. So I wanted to do a business called Chocolate by Me. We were going to design chocolates and stuff. And all my research showed me that this business was going to be great. People wanted it. And there was interesting connections between chocolate and coffee. So it was going to be a great business. Whatever kind of chocolate you wanted, you could come online, design your own chocolate, etc. All the research showed me that this is going to be great, but I don't know, something made me feel I'm not sure that the research is telling me the truth. Then I just paid about $100, $120 for some fake adverts on Facebook. And the adverts told me people just weren't interested. People just weren't interested. So you can think of really cheap experiments to do that will save you a lot of money. Mike Sikorsky, the mentor I mentioned, he does the ultimate lean website building. What he does is he builds a website by just doing one page. And then he'll have loads and loads of broken links, So you can click here, click there. He will then, at the end of every 2 or 3 days, count the number of people that clicked on each link and then only build the website according to whether people actually wanted it or not. Because he found that he would spend 80% of his time. Grant, I see you, just give me 2 seconds. He would give people, he would spend all of his time building this perfect website. And he found that the Pareto rule kicked in, that 80% of his time was spent on, building pages that nobody ever visited. Grant, what's your question, my friend?
Ask, you were talking about, how social media can be used, just like surveys on Facebook and that kind of thing. My question is, with the massive emergence of social media, especially things like, specifically Facebook as an advertising resource for companies, do you think it is a lot harder to get your name out there on social media, given that there are so many names out there?
2 ways of answering that. If you want to build a big brand, yes, virtually impossible unless you've got big dollars behind you. To micro target and to get customers that really want to buy your product, it's never been easier or quicker or cheaper. The reason why social media has been so effective is for advertisers. It is so effective. It really is effective. So Grant, there are 2 questions in what you asked. Is it harder to get your name out there? Yes. Is it easier to micro target and to sell to exactly who you should be selling and targeting? It's never been easier. My $120 on those adverts with Facebook, best $120 I ever spent. Grayson, you have a question, sir.
Yes, my question is around kind of translating problem statements into hypotheses. So if you are, looking at one problem that kind of has a variety of different sub branches of different problems, how do you prioritize some of those, hypothesis statements, which ones you test first versus which ones you test last?
Okay, you need to give an example. Let's be hyper specific. Let's do it for real.
Yeah, okay. So my example would be we're working on a platform business that is associated with Airbnb cleanings. And so within the cleaning industry, there's a lot of different problems that exist. There's pricing problems, there's communication problems, kind of different categories of problems. And so we have multiple hypotheses about these different issues that exist. And we're trying to prioritize what those.
Grayson, love it. Let's work on that. Love the problem. Who's your customer?
So since we have a dual-sided marketplace, our primary customer is the host of an Airbnb, and the secondary customer, which would be our user, is the cleaner.
Great. So there's a company in Nova Scotia called Swept, and they did kind of janitorial software, and they kind of tried to do something similar. So let's break that down. it doesn't matter what you think your hypotheses are. It really doesn't matter. What matters is when you talk to people and just have conversations, what they tell you is their number one issue. So, Stacey, I see you do Airbnb. Stacey, let me ask you, what is the biggest pain point for you when you do your Airbnb?
Probably getting guests during COVID right now is where my mind goes, but that's not what you want to hear.
No, but it is. So, Stacey, if I came up with a solution, and I'm doing it to save time, Grace, and I'm just going towards the sale. So, Stacey, so with COVID, I suppose it's a lot of hassle doing extra COVID cleaning and making sure those precautions are in place because you want to be COVID compliant.
That and the time gap that I think customers are looking for, like a 2-week time gap potentially between guesting.
Right. So if I could, so what is the biggest issue you have in finding good cleaners?
Probably costs and availability.
Okay, so if you found you weren't paying any more than the average in the marketplace and you found that they were trustworthy and they could do the slot when it suited you and work around you, would that be of interest to you? So Grayson, what I'm doing there is I'm actually trying to find out, but I was doing way too much leading there. You wouldn't, in a custom discovery, you wouldn't do that much leading. But what you're trying to do is find out from Stacey, you're trying to get her to imagine, what are the problems? How do you do it at the moment? One of the things you've got to do with your hypothesis is ask her, how do you do it now? Because that also reveals what your competition is. Because your competition might be inertia. Your competition might be the status quo. So think through how you do that on that side. Then the other thing is when you talk to cleaners, you could talk to cleaners and you could say, what is stopping you from doing work? Is it safety? Is it because you hear these horrific stories about how cleaners are treated? So how scared do you feel when you go to a new apartment and you don't know anything about them? Would it make you feel safer if da 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 da? So you might find out it's actually not price that's the most important thing to the cleaner, it's safety. But you may never have thought that in your hypotheses. What I find incredible is when you listen. And when you properly listen, people will tell you stuff you never dreamt of, but people just don't listen. We really do not listen. So Grayson, I hope that answers your question in that you can write down 20, 30 hypotheses. What I will do is just start off with 1 or 2 just genuine chats over a coffee and just talk me through the last Airbnb experience. Just talk me through it. And and how did the process end? How did the process begin? How did you do the cleaning? Because I had a problem with my London apartment and I ended up giving up on Airbnb, just renting my place out for a fixed contract because the cleaning issue for me was a big issue, especially when you're out of the country. So there is a problem, but all I want you to do initially is have a conversation with me. Does that help you, Grayson?
Yep, that's very helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you. So those are the 2 hypotheses I want you to think: value and growth with all of your businesses, all of your ideas. So using Grayson's example, he's got to prove to me that there is real value, that people will use him again and again and again, because the biggest issue Grayson's going to have, I can tell you this from my experience with other market side places, is I go on your platform, I find a great cleaner, the next time I do a deal, I can cut you out. So what you've got to do is somehow have some gaming element or something in there which actually incentivizes people to stay on the platform. So that's one thing. The second thing you've got to do is show me that value, and then show me that it goes viral, that every cleaner tries to get more and more jobs, that every cleaner recruits a further 10 cleaners onto the platform, and every Airbnb, there's a way of you going viral as well, that actually what you do is for your hosts, you can offer them an experience for their guests. So you become very sticky and you become viral. So think about how you can inject virality into your hypothesis and growth, because otherwise that business model, you're going to make very slim margins. And I get nervous about slim margins in terms of the cost of client acquisition then becomes very important to me, Grayson. So thank you. So there are 3 key things, and I always finish on time, and we have 9 minutes left. The key things are, having said all of that, there are 3 key things you need to prove in your business model: desirability, feasibility, and viability. Desirability, feasibility, and viability. And let's look at the business model. If you think about your business model canvas, as I showed you in the beginning, the left-hand side, where you're looking at the key partners and the key activities, that's all about feasible. Can you do it? The right-hand side, which talks about the value proposition, the customer segments, and the customer relationships, can you prove people want it? Can you prove to me people want this? Normally, in terms of focus areas, I will do the desirability first, then the feasibility. The last thing is viability. If you can do something and people want it, you get enough grace to work out how to make money out of it. Often though, you won't, if nobody wants it, doesn't matter how well you are at doing it, no matter how well you could make money out of it, if people don't want it, you can't fix that. You can't fix if somebody doesn't want it. So that is why we tend to, in customer discovery, really focus on desirability, because the other problems can be fixed. So desirability, feasibility, viability. I mean, when you think about the big risks investors face, the big risks investors face are twofold. One is technical risk, one is market risk. So if I open up a restaurant and all I do is all day breakfasts, my technical risks are very, very small. I know how to do an all day breakfast, not brilliant, but I know how to do it. My risk is entirely market, will customers come? If we think about self-driving cars, we know the desirability is strong. People do want a self-driving car. The market is worth tens of millions of units as justified by Tesla's share price, if you want proof of that thesis. But the key risk there is technical. Can we do it? So that's a good example of technical versus market. Most startup entrepreneurs have market risk, not technical risks. Amanda, this is a really good way of me thinking about your business. You have the technical risk kind of figured out in terms of you know how to do it, you know what you want it to design, and you'll find a technical person that you could say, do it this way, this way, this way. The key thing though is the market risk. Who wants it? Why would they want it? How they want it, etc. It's the desirability piece that I can't fix. The technical thing, if I throw enough money at a problem, we'll come up with a technical solution. I can't make customers want it. Somebody I worked for, another person, very, very wealthy person I worked for, brilliant bit of advice. He said, he would always use really simple analogies, and he would say, imagine it's a fish shop, because he would ask me to do investments, to analyze investment opportunities for him. Imagine it's a fish shop. You tell me I have the best restaurant, the best recipe in the world, it's the best fish ever. And I need money to tell all of these great people that the best fish is available. I'm not interested in investing. If I have a fish shop and there are customers lined up, it's the worst fish in the world, but it doesn't matter. There are hundreds of customers lined up and you say, I want money to buy the stock. I'm in. How do I invest? And that was his way of saying market versus technical. He was not interested in investing in helping you find a market. So these are the 9 building blocks in complete thing. So when you look at the in recorded version, you'll have it all. So these are the 9 building blocks, and these are all of the things that make up. Remember, I didn't touch on all of them. So value proposition, for example, there's newness, there's performance, customization, there's design, there's brand, there's price. Price can be a value proposition. That was the value proposition for Dell. That was a value proposition for Southwest Airlines. There's cost or risk reduction. So if you think about Xerox and the way Xerox changed their pricing model completely, so you didn't buy machines, you simply bought for every copy. That is a cost reduction. There's risk reduction, insurance, think about that. Accessibility, one of the things I'd say Microsoft have done and Google Drive do is their value proposition is accessibility. If I have a Word document, I know it will work on most people's computer. And then usability. I'd say that is probably one of the strengths of Apple. Its value proposition is performance, all that stuff, but it's also extraordinarily usable. And then I talked about revenue streams, key resources, key activities, partnerships, cost structure, etc. And this is a nice way to think of it in terms of colors. So think about the bottom bit being the feasibility, the blue, aqua blue, I think it's aqua blue, isn't it? I'm colorblind, which doesn't help. So aqua blue is the desirability, the pink is the feasibility, can it be done, and the orange is can you make money from it. So then you got to think about how the desirability, what assumptions you have about your customer segments, what assumptions about the relations you will need, what assumptions about how you'll be in touch with your clients, which is very expensive. Think through what your value proposition is, how will you test them, how and are they verifiable? And that's the same thing. And then you do the feasibility. There are some key takeaways there. What are the main things you need to do? Which partners do you need? What resources will you need? Can you do them or do you need money? Which partners can you convince me that you can get the resources to do this? And then finally, viability. Is it sustainable? Very, very important. But this is the third thing. What is your cost structure? What are the assumptions behind your price? So whenever you present a financial forecast, remember, it's a work of fiction. It's a work of fiction. I can read Harry Potter or I can read your financial projections. It's the same thing. I'm not interested in the numbers. What I'm interested in is the assumptions behind the numbers, because I can't really, a stupid investor will say, now, I notice in your projections, Amanda, you said you're going to do 1.3 million. I think you'll do 1.1. That's a stupid question. The question should be, what assumptions lead you to think you're going to get to 1.3 million? So how robust is your financial planning? How can you test the costing? Is your pricing structure novel? Does it fit in with the existing structure of your industry? And so the key takeaways for today are, the business model asks you to break down your assumptions into 9 blocks. We need to test each one of those assumptions. You must have a hypothesis, like Grayson said. He has a hypothesis for every one of those blocks. And I love the way Grayson recognizes that you've got 2 sides to the market. So you've got the cleaner market and you've got the Airbnb user, the rental, if you like, the property owner. So you have a hypothesis for the different customer segments. So you're a diversified customer segment. Have different hypotheses, design experiments. Spend a day as a cleaner, Grayson. People don't do that enough. Seriously, be a cleaner for a couple of shifts. What are the problems you experience? What makes you feel insecure? What would make it a better onboarding experience for you? How would you as a cleaner make yourself more loyal to the brand, etc.? So think about that. If you treat people badly, don't be surprised that they treat you badly. Grayson, I genuinely would recommend that you do spend a couple of days doing a shift as a cleaner. Genuinely, I was going to invest in a sandwich business, and before I invested in the sandwich business, I spent 3 shifts working in a sandwich shop. Loads of things I do. There was a bed company that I was working on. I knew nothing about beds. A friend of mine owned a chain of bed stores. I asked if I could work in his shop for 2 weekends. I did, so I learned enough about how to sell beds so I could have an intelligent conversation when I went to sell beds to retailers. Because people will smell that you know nothing. They will sniff that out and your credibility is destroyed. So make sure you understand that. So Grayson, if you turned around and said to me, listen, I actually tried it as a cleaner. What I noticed was a big issue was this. Like, whoa, this guy has real insights and commitment to this. So I would really advise that you do that. Prove or disprove your hypothesis. Have a robust and de-risked business model. And of course, rinse and repeat. And I am on time. Not that it's a competition, but I'm on time. Woohoo! So are there any questions? So I'm going to do a stop share so I can see everybody.
Real quick, Parmjot's going to be on for questions, but just a quick plug. I put a survey in the link and chat there. If you can fill that out, that's always helpful. And I also put a link to sign up for the next Launch Lab series, which is data visualization on March 2nd. But with that, Parmjot, take it away if there are any questions anyone has.
Oh, data visualization. That is something you've got to see.
It's going to be awesome.
That was a good joke. That is something you got to see. Data visualization.
I know. Good job. Good job. I almost missed it if you didn't call it out.
Sarah knew straight away. Sarah knew.
She's laughing. I can tell.
It's like, I remember I did meet a guy called Benjamin Yoskowitz who wrote the book Lean Startup. And I said to him, dude, I thought the book would be slimmer. And he thought that was funny. Amanda, what would your question be?
Well, what do you recommend are some strategies for testing hypotheses in software development without actually building the software?
Videos, screenshots. People always think you have to build stuff. You don't. You don't have to build something. The Mike Sikorsky thing, build something, have lots of false things. Look at how people use it. Sit somebody down in front of a computer, say, imagine. I've even seen people design websites with post-it notes on a website and say, which post-it note do you want to pick? And they pick post. I've seen people do crazy stuff. And people always make these things so complicated. You can do it. You don't. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. The worst thing that a lot of people do, and this is the advice everybody gives. You've got to hire a CTO, you've got to have a technical co-founder. You've got to have a technical person sooner or later in the mix. Absolutely, you do. But sometimes, if you give somebody a hammer, every problem looks like a nail to them. And so I just think, understand why people want the website first. Understand, before we build a thing, how would they use it? Why would they use it? Why could they not use a phone directory? Why could they not use other solutions? So just think through real lean. One of the things I used to do with a friend of mine, Fergus, who Sarah, you've met a few times, we used to do consulting. One of the questions we used to ask businesses was, if you got £50,000, because this was in the UK, what are the 3 or 4 things you'll do with that £50,000? And they would say it. And then we would say, now imagine that you don't have that money. How do you achieve the same things without the money? It's incredible how many people suddenly become very creative and think, actually, I could do it this way, this way, this way. So there are always ways to be creative and not build stuff. I hope that answers your question, Amanda. Brandon, my man, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I actually really enjoyed this.
Thank you. I like the way you expressed.
Not as if I'm surprised, but
yeah, you were like, I actually enjoyed it. I came here thinking it wasn't, but
yeah, no, I mean I was honestly genuinely surprised. I didn't know that you were going to be teaching this one, so I'm actually glad that happened. How do you create a reoccurring customer and then also a lifelong customer if your product is something that, like for my company, they repurchase a phone maybe every 2.5 years on average, and something that is a rare purchase?
Love it, love it. The thing may be a rare purchase, but the ecosystem around it, there may be covers that have to go with it. There may be insurance that has to go with it. There may be other bits and pieces. You have to own the customer occasion. Starbucks, Amanda asked me about Starbucks. Very interesting thing about Starbucks. Starbucks used to say Starbucks coffee, didn't it? And then they gradually got rid of the coffee thing. Starbucks was always never about coffee. You know, if you've drank it, you know. Starbucks was always about the third place. It wasn't home, it wasn't work. So one of the things they did was the chair design. They had 3 different levels of seating because they realized if you had the same level of seating, it looked like a canteen or a restaurant. If you had all high chairs, it would have a very different feel, like a bar. So they deliberately had a sofa, bar chairs, and small chairs. So it looked like the third place, because what they wanted to own was the occasion, not the coffee. So what you've got to do, Brandon, is think through the phone thing. What is the occasion they need to own? What can you do to make sure if they buy this insurance, we can do this with your phone afterwards? What covers? It might be a secondhand phone, but we can make it look brand new by giving you a different cover every month. Subscribe to the service and you'll have a different surprise ringtone every month, etc., etc., etc. Think about all the things you can do to own the occasion.
Okay. Yeah, no, I already had some ideas for brand expansion, but I hadn't thought of it in a subscription-based platform.
Brandon, I know the name, the word brand is in your name, but don't think about brand extension. Seriously, do not think about brand extension. Think about the occasion extension, and then don't do clever stuff with branding and stuff yet.
Well, no, it was like more so like product expansion, I guess, like diversifying it into the...
Love it, Brandon, love it. Just the confusion over language, love it, yes. Absolutely, product expansion, love that. Thank you very much indeed. Jake Cranley, how you doing, Jake?
I'm a little cold.
Mate, I'm in Canada.
I think it's colder here than Canada.
We got so excited. I said, oh my God, I need sunglasses because I'm presenting to Arkansas. That's how excited I got. I was like, wow, there's a tropical heat wave. It's only -14 down there. We're all packed, ready to go, Grayson. Jake. So did you have a question, Jake, or you want to talk about the cold with the woolly hat and everything? And there's knowledge behind you. How can you be cold knowing that you're getting the warm glow of knowledge behind you?
You'd be surprised. I have a question. So I'm faculty here and I study regulated markets, right? How startups get into regulated markets.
Yep.
And I'd be curious about your thoughts on the applicability of business model canvas to a startup in a regulated market. Right, they face different challenges, right? Unique challenges, right? The customer isn't necessarily the customer. You have intermediaries, things like that.
Well, what's really interesting is most of the bigger startups did so with illegal business models. Airbnb, Uber, all of those. So they were regulated markets, but they just broke the law. So there's one thesis, which is if you look at what American companies have done, they've just broken the law, and you hopefully get big enough before you get caught. And that is true. That is, there are loads of concerns about the regulatory things. And the other thing is a lot of startups are very, very creative with laws, and they go into jurisdictions where, so in France, for example, with Uber, you can't order, they have these weird rules. You can order an Uber, but it has to be at least half an hour after you've ordered it. It can't be instant, because only the taxis have the right to be instantly. London has the same thing. You can't with only black cabs in London. So there are 4 types of cabs, taxis in London. There's the black cab. The only black cabs have the right to be waved down on the street. If you wave down an Uber, you get fined. So there are loads and loads of there's loads of weird regulations about loads of stuff. In Canada, Canada's full of weird rules and regulations where margarine in Quebec can be orange, etc. It's all really weird. So with entrepreneurs, you find jurisdictions where it isn't illegal or the regulatory regime is light, and you prove you do a test case study. That's why a lot of startups go to places like New Zealand to test things in a regulatory environment. And then you prove the case, you prove the thesis, and then you do lots of lobbying. And what a lot of companies do in Canada, I've seen them do it, in the UK, they do that. They promise to go into a foreign country if the foreign country will help them with regulatory stuff. Loads of companies do that. So that's just giving you 2 or 3 examples, Jake. I hope that helps. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Kyle Berger, you raised your hand.
Yes, I had a.
Please tell me you got a sister called Ham.
I'm sorry?
Do you have somebody in the family called Ham?
No, we have middle names that all start with A though. So mine's
a burger will do. A burger will do. Great.
But yeah, my question. One of my friends asked me interesting question that I didn't have a great answer to. They want to open a bakery and they want to start at home before they go into a storefront, and they also wanted to know how to differentiate products in a space that, you know, bakery. Of course, you're going to have some similar competition around town. So I was curious your thoughts on how to differentiate in one of those settings.
Hey, that is a really difficult question, and I really don't know the answer to that one. There are so many ways to differentiate, and what you've got to do though is, I find, and this is where I was talking to Brandon about, you know, the branding thing. This is why I get nervous. Don't do things. And Grayson, you asked the question about hypotheses. Don't do that. Ask the customers what is the differentiator. So find out where this bakery is going to be located. Find out. Ask people, which bakery do you go to at the moment? What do you love about it? Why? Actually, ask them. Don't ask them what don't you like about it, because they won't tell you. What do you love about the bakery? Especially Arkansans. Arkansans are so flipping nice as people. You are so nice as people. That's why I keep coming back. I love the place. But ask them, what do you love about your product? What do you love about it? If there was just one thing, because I know you love it, but if there's one thing you could change about the bakery, what would it be? And find out if you get some level of commonality, then offer that. Don't do this differentiation as an academic exercise. Do it as an exercise born from customer discovery. Do it as something that actually, yeah, free delivery of hot donuts. Sarah, when did you join the police force?
Really?
We don't know. We I think England never got over Krispy Kreme donuts collapsing. We never got over that. I used to love Krispy Kreme. I remember the lineups that we used to have when there was a Krispy Kreme shop opening up. We go, it was just crazy.
Delightful.
So Kyle, I hope that helps. So don't all of you, don't do differentiation until your customers tell you this is the differentiation I want. Because I could do some very clever differentiation that nobody puts a value on. You've got to do differentiation that people value. And so many people make that fundamental mistake of not differentiating with value. Uber, one of the things Uber realized was people hated the coins and the change aspect of. So one of the things I love about Starbucks and Uber is when I travel, the 2 things I actually need are money for, used to be coffee and taxis. Uber and Starbucks app gets rid of that need. I love that. I love that my phone can get me a Starbucks anywhere in the world. And I love that. And what's interesting with Starbucks is at any one time, Starbucks are holding more money in their bank account than the 17th largest bank in the world. That's how much money they hold. So it's just, so they're earning so much money in interest now, just through the deposits on their account. So I hope that answers your question, Kyle. So I'm happy to stay on for another couple of minutes. So obviously, if you have to leave, I appreciate it. Lawrence, you didn't have any questions for me, which is very disappointing. And this was your first workshop you've ever attended. And, you know, you're in Dallas, which is always a great place to talk about. Sarah, you are very welcome. You are very welcome. Lawrence, what would your question be?
I think it would be more general. What would you suggest somebody coming out of college that has a established sort of career path, you know, with a good job and all that stuff, but has kind of a pull towards, okay, I understand how entrepreneurship works. I understand how analytics works and stuff like that, but without getting, I guess overextending myself across a whole bunch of different areas and then trying to figure out, whether I should outsource this before I even have an actual idea constructed, you know?
Okay, so Lawrence, I think you're asking me a philosophical question about life, which I'm more than happy to answer. So Lawrence, I will tell you, the average age, Amanda, what is the average age? You switched off a little bit too soon. Amanda, what is the average age of a successful entrepreneur, founder?
I believe it's been quoted at 45.
45, thank you. Yes, it is. It is 45, so don't get carried away with the Mark Zuckerberg. The best way to be successful is to just have lots and lots and lots of life experiences. Life experience will tell you what when we talk about differentiation and stuff, as Brandon and Grayson, as all these people get to know their customers. They get to know their customers. I've learned to only back entrepreneurs who have deep in industry expertise because they have firsthand experience of who has the pain, who would be my first two customers. So Lawrence, what I want you to do is just do things you enjoy for the time being, as long as Chris Rock had that great saying, do anything you enjoy as long as they're paying. And so do things you enjoy, but make sure they're paying, because sometimes you've got to tell people you can't do things you enjoy if there's no money in it. But do things where, if it's not about the money, think about the learning. So Lawrence, what I want you to do is think about the next 5 years of your career plan. I'm going to be a learning machine. I am going to be a massive learning machine, and I'm just going to take on jobs, not because of salary, status. What could I learn if I worked there for 2 years? Does that excite me? Does that bring me further towards the goal? Because while you're learning, happiness is something, the pursuit of happiness is such an oxymoron. No one who pursues happiness is ever happy. Happiness is always a byproduct of doing something else. Always. Happiness is never a byproduct of, I'm going to be happy tomorrow. If it was easy as that, we'd all know what happiness is. So Lawrence, this is a big philosophical question. I hope that helps. Just accumulate learning, accumulate experiences. And one day something will happen and you'll be like, hang on, because that's what happened with me. My first business it was just weird. I might come across as this entrepreneur and everything. What just happened was I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, really. And what happens is the more you put yourself out there, the more magic happens. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation. I really, really believe that. Hunter, you are very, very welcome. You kind of scare me a little bit, not just with the name, but the photograph and the backdrop. So thank you for those kind comments. Appreciate that, Hunter. So Lawrence, I hope that was a good answer. You happy with the answer?
Yeah, it was great. And I think as a lot of us, I think a few of us are students, we've heard that a lot, so it's just good to have it reiterated. And I guess I'll put a little plug. I've tried connecting with you on LinkedIn, so I definitely appreciate that if you responded.
Absolutely. Well, try again, Lawrence. Try again. I don't connect with people I've never met before. So now that I've met you, I'll connect with you. But the other thing is Scott Galloway. He does a great talk on YouTube. Scott Galloway, great professor at NYU Stern. He says the worst bit of advice people can give you is follow your passion, and that the advice is often given by people who've made their money from molting iron. So that tells you a lot about where their passion was. And and also when people say follow your passion, you've got to remember what the definition of passion is. It's either the suffering of Christ or a strong sexual desire. So, choose which definition you go for. But what you've got to do is choose intelligently. And what intelligently means is, will this be a learning opportunity? Will I grow? Because if we only do things we love doing, we are denying ourselves the opportunity to learn new things we may love. Because a lot of things for me were uncomfortable. And then I learned to love them. The first time I did a public talk over Zoom, it was just weird as hell. It was weird and I didn't enjoy it, but I persevered and now I prefer Zoom. So yeah, so make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, but not too uncomfortable. So don't go outside your comfort zone, stretch your comfort zone. Thank you very much indeed. Good night to all of you. Olga, thank you very much indeed. I hope the electricity comes on. So thank you very much. Sarah, always my pleasure. Brandon, thank you very much. Stacey, thank you for organizing this. Amanda, good to see you. No doubt we'll be chatting over Facebook or something soon. Brandon, thank you as always for your attention. Kristen, thank you. You're very welcome. Grayson and Wenji.